All right. Hey y'all. Okay, so really great class on Tuesday evening, like always. Um, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a recap of the toy letter model that we did yesterday evening, and just so that you guys can get a strong grasp of using one shape to cut out another shape of an object. Um, and in this case, we're doing, a nice circular shape to be integrated into a square shape. Okay. And this is sort of a mechanical modeling principle that I kind of want you guys to wrap your head around. So let's get started. I'm just going to basically go through, and I'll try and do things a little bit quicker this time, um, and you guys can, scrub through the video uh, at your heart's content. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm actually just going to clean things up here a little bit. Don't need some things that I don't need here. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of that shelf so I have some real estate. And beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just repoint my project. I'm going to set my project. So you remember how we created a project folder, and when we're working on our models, we want to, repoint Maya to that particular project folder. Sometimes when you open Maya, it's already there, but I don't think mine is, so I'm going to go down to Set Project. Okay, and no, it's not finding it. So I'm just going to go to my computer, Lexar, Brad Stillett Project, and Maya, and I'll say Set. Okay, and I'm immediately going to I'm going to save this scene. Okay, so it's finding my scenes folder, but I don't want to save it in scenes. This scene is actually, this is a model scene, so I'm going to go into Assets, Props, Toy Letter, and in that toy letter directory, I'm going to call this toy letter 01 Maya binary, and I'll say yes. Okay. All right, so let's get started. First thing I need a plane, right? Because I need my reference. So I'm going to go to Create. I'll pull off my Create tab, and I'll pull it up here. Poly Primitives, Interactive Creation turned off, and plane. And there's my plane. I'll hit F to focus in. Get my plane here. And I'll name the plane. I'll say, I can just call it ref plane 1. Ref pane. I need an L in there. Ref pane, ref plane. Okay. Ref plane 1. Looks good. And then I'll come into inputs, and I can see my construction history is giving me this create polyplane node here. So I'm going to click that node, and I'm just going to click and drag over these two channels, and I'll say 1 for subdivisions, width, and height. Nice and simple, nice and clean. Okay. Next thing I'll do, maybe I'll throw this onto a display layer. I'll rename this layer. I'll say ref plane. I always like to say disp, so that I know that that is a display layer. And I'll give it a color of blue and save that. Okay. And if I ever create some more reference planes, I can always right click and say add selected objects to the layer. Just over there. Okay. And I might do that. So first thing I'll do, I'm going to rotate this guy on the X. by 90 degrees. Okay, and remember, I want this plane pointing down this way. I want it pointing this way, down the z-axis. I want it facing the z-axis, like this, okay? Okay, so this is the x-axis, up and down is the y-axis, and this is the z-axis. Okay, so I want the plane facing the z-axis, running along this line. Make sense? Okay. All right. So now we know that our images. Okay, we've done this enough times so that I think the class knows that all the. I'm pretty sure all of the images are the same aspect ratio, so 960 by 720, I believe. So 960 by 720, and I'll just click in the viewport here, hit F to focus, and you can see it's pretty darn big. So with my object selected, I'll just scale it down. I can scale it manually with the square here. My yellow square. Remember, I want to uniformly scale this. I don't want to be scaling it this way or this way. Okay, I want to be scaling it from the middle square here, so that it's a uniform scale. And you can see my scale channels here. The way I can uniformly scale it is scale it in all three channels. So if I take these values here, I highlight them, I'd click and drag over them, highlight them. I'll say a value of 0.2 or 0.1. Okay, so it's getting smaller. Okay, it still needs to be smaller, so I'll say just drag it down like that. Okay, because these are centimeters, and I know that my toy letter is not more than like 9 centimeters high. So, and then I'll go to the move tool. I'll drag this up. Okay. Remember, the move tool is W. So there's that. So now I'm going to throw my image on there. So I'll come over here. I'll get out of the create menu. I don't need this anymore. And I'm going to pull up my Hypershade. Rendering editors. Okay, so window. Go to window. Rendering editors. Hypershade. Okay. Here's our Hypershade. Here's our Hypershade. So I got this guy. And I'll throw a nice Lambert shader on it, because I don't need any specularity highlights or any anisotropic highlights, any of that stuff. Just okay. Lambert 2. Okay, and remember, don't ever use the Lambert 1 shader to put anything onto to texture any of your objects. Use that. That's Maya's native native shader. The default shader. Okay, so this is what is applied to every object that's created, so don't ever use this to shade your objects. Create new ones. You can double click them up here in the materials tab. Okay, you got all your materials up here. Okay, so Lambert 2, and I'm just going to double click it. I can see it in my attribute editor. And I'll just call this ref. I'm actually going to call it ref front mat. Okay, so ref front reference material. Okay, so that I know that this is the image the material that I'm going to place on the front reference image plane. Okay, so with that renamed, I'm going to come to the color channel, and I want an image on this material. Okay, so I'm going to come to the color channel. Okay, now remember, we haven't put UVs, we haven't projected UVs onto this. Remember, we need to project UVs. We will do that, but I'll create my material first, because again, the material, once it's created in the Hypershade, it's always going to be there. It's not going to go anywhere, right? So I go into the color channel here. It's giving me a list of options. So if I want an image on a material, I'm going to say File. Okay, that allows me to put an image or a photograph. So I'll click that guy. Here's my image name. So I'm going to go and grab my handy dandy image. So right now it's pointing me to source images, because that's where you put your polished textures. but we don't have any polished textures yet. We just want an image, a raw image. So we're going to go up a step and over to images, reference, toy letter, TL1. There we go. All right. Looking good. Looking good, looking good. All right, now let's give this guy UVs. So I'm going to click this guy. We have my material up here, so ref front material, ref front matte. So now this guy needs UVs. And again, let's not worry too much about UVs right now. All you need to know is it's a way for Maya to understand how to project an image onto a 3D object. But we'll get into UVs. We'll do a whole day on UVs one day. It'll be lots of fun. You guys are going to kill me because it's kind of confusing for a lot of noobs in 3D. Anyway, it's okay. Hope you don't mind if I call you noobs. That's what I'm assuming. We're all noobs at some point. So I'm sorry if sorry if you're not crazy about the term. But hey, we all got to start somewhere, right? So, okay, so create UVs. We got this here. I'm going to click this guy, right? Want this selected. And since it's a flat plane, I can use planar mapping. So planar mapping meaning a flat plane. You can use cylindrical mapping, spherical mapping, automatic mapping. So these, it's kind of self-explanatory what they do. So for a cylinder, you use, spherical, automatic. It's a little bit different. Anyhow, we'll get more into that on our UVs day. Okay, I'm digressing a bit. Sorry. So we'll go to the options box. Always click the options box so that we can select which method of projection we want to use. Okay, so always click this guy when you're applying projecting UVs. So I'm going to click that. Brings up this handy dandy little guy here. I'm going to exit out of my create UVs. So I got this guy, and I know I'm projecting on the y-axis. I'll just go to edit, reset settings just to be safe, just to make sure that all my settings are nice and reset. And I'm going to say z-axis and then apply. Okay, and there we go. So this is showing me my 2D projection. Okay, or in other words, my polyplanar projection 1. All right. So I can exit this, and I'll just click anywhere else on the screen because I've got my UVs. And now I'm in component mode, okay? And I don't want to be in component mode, so I'll just right click and go to object, okay? And then I'll click it again. And then I'm in this nice solid object mode. So it's got UVs on it. I've got my object selected. I'm going to come over to my ref front material. I'll right click and hold and say assign material to selection. Make sure your object is selected, okay? So I'm assigning it. So this guy says result Lambert to SG, which means this guy has been applied to the object. So I'll hit the 6 key, and there we go. Okay, and if you remember, this guy's roughly 6 centimeters, 9 centimeters tall. That's 6. Okay, so I'm going to come over and I'm just going to tap the space bar so that I can see my 4 views. I'll hit F to focus in on all sides, and then I'm going to hit the 6 key in the front view over here to see what I'm doing. Okay, so let me grab my perspective view. And maybe in the perspective view, I'm going to move this guy down a little bit so that I can see where his wheels are in relation to my plane here, the origin. So I don't want it to drop below the origin. Okay, the origin meaning 0, 0, 0 in all axis. So I just want to leave it there, and I'll scale it up just a little bit and move it down. So I'm just going to do a rough guesstimation here. So 3, 6, 9. Okay. So it's a bit big actually. So actually I'm going to scale it down a bit. Move it down. So 3, 6, 9, 10. Good enough. Okay. Again, it doesn't have to be like perfect, but you want to try and get it pretty spot on. So guys, you know what we'll do? Let's create another plane. I'm going to create another plane, and I'm going to project the other view, okay, so the side view of this guy onto my my plane. Okay, so this guy, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this plane and then rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to open up my outliner over here. I'm going to come over, okay, click this, and I got my ref plane 1. I'm going to say with this guy selected, okay, so I'm just going to, if I click anywhere else it's not selected, but if I select this guy and I say Control D, okay, Control D means duplicate, right? So underneath this guy there's another plane right on top of it. So what I can do is I've got this ref plane 1, it's created this ref plane 2 and it's selected. I'll hit the E key to rotate, and I'll just rotate it by coming into my channel attributes, and I'll rotate this guy on the Y axis, okay, the rotate Y. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Okay. And there you can see that this guy's being projected this way. Okay. So here's the front view, and here's the side view. So if I click, if I go back to my 4 views, I can see I've got the side view and the front view. Now both of the images are the same, so obviously it's gonna, you know, it's just a little weird, right? So with my ref plane 2 selected, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a new material. Okay. So go over here, open up my Hypershade. I'm going to make another Lambert material. So here's Lambert 3. You can actually see it here in my work area. Lambert 3, I'll double click this. Actually, I'll just click my other material here. I'm going to double click my other material. I'm going to take this text, copy it, and then paste it. Okay, but I can't have front material. It's got to be something different. So I'm going to say ref. I'll say side. Side is fine. Ref side material, and in the color channel, I'm going to say file. And that'll do fine. I'm going to open that. Okay. Alright. So I want to find my ref plane 2. So ref plane 2, that's the one that's selected. Very good. And I want to say ref side material. And I'm going to assign that. Okay. So now got this guy just like that. The only thing though is I want this guy to be pretty much on the center of the origin, so it's a little bit over on this side too much, so I just want to pull it a bit this way. Okay. Almost so that it's right in the center of this piece of paper. Okay. Alright. Perfect. Okay. And I'm actually going to add this to my reference layer. So the way I can do that is I can select my ref plane 2. I want to make sure that my reference plane 2 is selected. And I'm going to come down to this already created ref plane display layer, and I'm going to right click and come down to add selected objects. So once I do that, I can turn them both on and off just like that in a snap. Okay. And now I'm going to turn this other button to R so that I can't select them. So they're just referenced. Alright. So these aren't perfectly lined up, but they're pretty damn close. All right? They're pretty damn close. And that's all we need. All right? So we're going to adhere to one a little more than the other. The side view we're kind of just going to use as, again, a guideline as to the thickness. If we get the thickness give or take right, it's going to be just fine. Okay? So let's get started. Let's start modeling. I'm going to close down my Hypershade, and what I will actually do is I'm going to just let's go ahead and just create a cube. So I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to scale up my cube. Okay, I'm going to scale it up. I'm going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to grab my vertices, hit the 4 key, grab these top ones, hit the 6 key. Okay. And I'm going to, on the y-axis, just going to pull it up. Okay. Hit the 4 key, grab the bottom verts, hit the 6 key, and pull it down. Okay. And 4 key to grab all my verts, 6 key, pull it to the side. Okay. Just doing my best to line things up. So now I can come into the side view. Okay. Rotate up like this. Maybe grab these verts. That. Pull them back this way. That's about right. Okay, so by now I'm going to want you to start remembering these hotkeys. By now you should know what the 4 key and the 6 key does, so I'm not going to keep repeating them. I'm just going to keep going. Once I've sort of repeated those a few times, make your notes, take your notes, take your notes. Not to be hard on you, but at this point, I want you guys to be on Maya, remembering things, making notes. Alright. So that's about my base shape. Okay. And let's go ahead and fill out the rest of this shape by getting these two, remember our nubbin shapes here? So we're going to get our two nubbins in there. Okay. In fact, what I might do is I'm going to do a Control S to save. And then I'm going to say File, Save Scene As, Toilet 01. I'll just replace the 1 with a 2. And now we can keep going. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so how are we going to get those nubbins in there? Well, we know that this and this point roughly is the total height of our toy letter. So let's go ahead and find the center point by splitting this edge ring in half here. These edge rings, right? Remember that? You guys remember that? Yeah, you do. Okay, so how do we split an edge ring? Okay, well, if we think about what an edge ring is, I'll hide my reference. An edge ring is this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. So a ring is like we call if I go to the 4 key and I click on this edge and I go to edge mode, if I grab all these guys, this is a ring of edges. Okay, in the same sense that these edges are a ring of edges. So this ring goes around this way, and this ring of edges goes around this way. Okay, so we're going to split this. We're going to split this edge ring. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of these edges. Okay, and remember from class, if you're a Mac user, it's Command and hold right click. If you're a Windows user, it's Control, right click, and hold. So I'm going to right click and hold with Control. So Control, right click. I'm going to go down to Edge Ring Utilities, and then to Edge Ring and Split. Beautiful. Right down the middle. Okay. So there we go. So we got a nice edge ring there. And now we're going to extrude out these front faces here. Okay. So let me go to face mode. I'll grab this face here. And you know what? Why don't we turn down the opacity on our reference planes? So I'm going to turn off my reference. It was set to reference. I'm going to click this until it's clear so that I can grab these guys again. So I'll grab this guy. I'll go to my attribute editor. Right? So the attribute editor with one of these images clicked. And if I come all the way over, if I click this arrow all the way over, I see my ref front material. Okay. So I'm going to click that. This is going to bring up the material of this guy. And I'll just take my transparency and slide it over. Okay. So just about like that. Okay. I can still see that B shape, so that's about right. And I'm going to grab this guy and do the same thing. So I'll grab this guy. Oh, look at there. Ref side material. It brought me right to it. Transparency. And I'll just slide it over. Do about the same. Okay. Cool. So I can still, just faintly, I can see these wheels in this. Okay, so that's good. Alright, and now I'm going to say Control A again to get out of that, back to my channel box and layer editor, and then I'll put these back onto reference so that I can't grab them anymore. Alright, so face mode, I'm going to extrude these two faces out. Okay. And so let's go and get our modeling tools. So I'll say go under mesh tools. I'll pull this guy off and edit mesh as well. We'll pull this guy off. Okay. So in 2015, let's go to show modeling toolkit. Okay. And we're going to say extrude. So we'll click extrude with those two faces selected. And if I scroll down, I'm going to check off keep faces together. So make sure you check this off. And then when we see we got our arrows, our cursor has turned to arrows. If I left click and drag to the right, it's going to pull these guys out. Okay, and I'll rotate to the side a little bit. And I'll left click and drag again. And again, like I can left click and drag and adjust that extrusion. And you can see up here it says extrude on the local Z. So pull it out. That's about right. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to hit the Q key to get out of that tool. Perfect. Alright. So now I can grab this guy and I'm going to scale it. And this is really important. I only want to be scaling in the y-axis, okay? So I'm going to grab this green box here and I'm going to scale it. Just a little bit. And I'll grab this face with my scale tool selected again. Scale it. Only on the y-axis, okay? That's about right. So I'm going to toggle between 1 and 3 to see how this is solving as the sub-Ds take over. Alright, so I got the basis of a shape, but I need to start truing some edges up, okay? I want to start creasing up some of these edges. So if I look at this as a shape as a whole, first thing I'm going to crease up is this edge here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll hit the 1 key and I'm going to drop in an edge loop. So I'm going to insert an edge loop up there. Okay, so under Mesh Tools, I can say Insert Edge Loop Tool. I'll grab this, and I'm just going to grab it, and I'm going to click and drag on this edge. Okay, and I'll drop it a bit there. Check that. It's pretty good. Okay, and I'll hit the Q key to get out of that tool. Okay. All right. Not bad. Okay. And let's now start truing up these little nubbin shapes on the end. And maybe even I want to true up this top edge here until it comes to this guy here. So I want to hold this shape here. I want the top of my B to be a nice straight cut. So in order for me to make this flat, I need to insert another edge loop right tight up against this guy. So that's what I'm going to do. Say Insert Edge Loop Tool. Okay, and I'm doing this with the manual Insert Edge Loop Tool because I want to be able to slide it right up to the close sort of part like that. So I'll just drop that there, and I'll hit the Q key. Okay. Now let's see how that looks. Yeah, good. Nice. Okay. So I got this nice sort of nice shape here. So if I come in and I look, I can see that SubDs isn't really handling this very well because it's kind of choppy, right? You can see this kind of like jagged edge thing here. Okay, that's because I don't have enough resolution in my mesh. Okay, so I want it to solve a little bit better. I want it to be nice and smooth. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a bit more resolution to this mesh, but I need to do it in a nice even way, okay? Because I want nice square polys. Okay, so let's just go in and let's split this edge ring right around here. Okay, so I'm going to hold this. I'll split that edge ring, and I'll split this one down here too. So I'll just grab this and hit the G key to repeat the last command. Okay, nice. So what's that done? Okay, so it's sort of flattened out this front part here. So I don't really like that, but it has kind of smoothed things out for me in between these two edges. So it's given me a bit more resolution in how Maya is handling the solving of the SubDs. So that's good. Okay, so I don't want it to be flat though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into vertex mode, and I'll come to the side, and I'm going to grab this row of verts, and I'm going to grab these guys too, because when I move them, I want them to move the same distance. And then I'll just go to the move tool and just pull them out, and I'll use my 3 key to sort of reference how that's doing that. And that's a nice arc, just like that. It's giving me a nice arc like that. And then maybe I'll split these rings just like that. And I can just hit the G key. Okay. And then I'll scale them up that a little bit, just to true those up. Double click this guy, and I'll scale him up. Okay. So look at that nice, look at how well it's solving that surface now. It's much better, right? Okay. So it's really truing things up well for me this way. So let's take a look at the side here. And in fact, let's go into object mode with our guy here, and let's add this to a display layer. Okay, So I'll come back to my display layers by hitting Control A few times, and I'll just pop this onto a new layer, and I'll call this base. I'll say base letter. I can say geodisp. So base letter geodisp. Okay. And maybe I'll pick red for this. Okay. So now I can hide this. So I'm going to shut that off for a second and let's just look. So it's a really square from the side. You can see it's pretty square, right? And when I open this up again and I hit smooth, well, my B isn't so square, is it? So why is that? Well, we need to crease the side edges of this. And also, we want to split this guy right down the middle so that we can copy one side to the other, because this is going to be very symmetrical from the side. Okay, from the front we know it's asymmetrical. It's not symmetrical. From the side it is symmetrical. So let's go ahead and split this guy. Okay. So I'll hide my reference again. So I'm gonna, first of all, I'm just gonna true up these edges here. So I'll say insert edge loop tool, and I'll just click any of these edges and drag over. Nice. Looks pretty good. I'll click and drag over. Just like that. Pretty good. Okay, hit the Q key to get out of that command. Bring back my reference. Nice. Okay, so that's looking good. I'll hit Control S to save that. Beautiful. Alright. Nice. Nice. Alright. So our toy letter is looking pretty nice. So I'd say that cuts it for our base shape. So we got our base shape. So now, if I hide my letter, we need to cut these guys out, right? Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we're going to introduce using a cylinder just like we did in class. But what do we need to get this cylinder in there? Well, we need some kind of middle reference point to two things. We need an edge loop running right down the center here for two reasons. One, we want to be able to make a nice clean X through here, and two, we need a place to put our cylinder. So why do I say X? Like why don't I cut it this way or horizontally? Why do I say X? Well, I mean, if we take what a cylinder really is a cylinder's got a number of sides in it. So what I need to do is I need to find a way, like as a modeler, I need to say, okay, well, how can I integrate a cylinder into this square shape while keeping the entire model in four-sided faces? So what I need to do is I need to do a bit of like engineering work or handiwork. Okay, I need to kind of look at this and say, okay, well, I need to plan it out. Okay, I need to plan it out. So I need to say, well, okay, let's just grab a cylinder. I'm going to say create. Actually, before I create a cylinder, I need to name my object here. Really, you should do that in the beginning, but that's okay. We'll say we're going to name this base object. We're going to say pcube1. We'll click up here, and actually, let's get into good habits. Let's keep those good habits that I'm trying to teach you. I'll go to Window, grab my outliner, bam. Okay, so I'll pull this here. I'm going to double click this guy. I'll name it from over here. I'm going to say mesh base letter 1. Mesh base letter 1. Okay, because this is our geometry that we are going to later on rig. And so when we're doing rigging, we want to be able to distinguish between our geometry and things like bones, what we call them in Maya, we call them joints, and controls, and so on and so forth. So from a production standpoint, we always call it mesh is the prefix. So whenever you're modeling something, say mesh first and then base letter with a 1 at the end of it. Okay. So I got this guy nicely named. So I'm going to create a poly cylinder. I'll move this guy up and I'm going to rotate it on the X 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate it. Okay. And I got this cylinder here. Okay. I'll turn off my reference, and I'll even turn off, I'm going to turn off my grid. I don't want to see this anymore because it's just kind of cluttering up my viewport. So I'm going to click the grid here. Okay. So I need to do a bit of planning. I've got this cylinder here, right? I've got this cylinder, and I need to say, well, how do I get this cylinder nicely integrated into all of this geometry? Okay, well, first thing is when I go to smooth this cylinder, I don't need this many sides. Okay, I don't need this many sides because if I smooth this, it's just overkill. Okay, I don't need this many sides. So I can say to myself, well, let's kill the amount of geometry that I have in this. So from a production standpoint, I don't want things to be super high polygon. You always want to keep your poly count as low as possible. So it's a bit of a trade-off, okay? Your poly count needs to be high enough so that the surfaces, like this guy, solve properly. Okay, so if I didn't have this edge in here, the way Maya would calculate this, it wouldn't handle that sub-D very well. It wouldn't subdivide it very well. But since I put that in there, it doesn't have to work very hard to smooth out this corner. So yeah, you need subdivisions, but this is overkill. This is way too many. I could easily get away with 8 sub-Ds on this guy. So I'm going to come to my polycylinder inputs, and I'm going to click and drag the subdivision axis down from 20. I'll click middle mouse, click and drag that attribute. When I grab it, I'll bring it to 8. Okay, so when I look at this, I go, all right, so we got something that's 8. So how is 8 for a number? Well, if I do a little bit of, if I click this guy and turn it to, so let's go to shaded mode. And you know what? I'm going to come up to shading, and I'm going to go to wireframe unshaded so that I can see all this stuff. So if I look at the cylinder, if I plan this out properly, I say, okay, how can I integrate the cylinder into this square shape and keep everything in quads? So I'm going to say, well, if I make a cut right down the middle, and then I cut this in an X shape, I can connect this guy to this guy, which will make a face, a four-sided face here, so we can kind of see in our mind, we can draw with our imagination, we can make, if I made a cut from here to here, and here to here, that means that I can say, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I made a cut down the middle, I could say 1, 2, 3, 4. And it would be the same on this side because it's symmetrical. So let me show you what I mean. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that this cylinder shape is about the size that my reference needs it to be. So if I grab this, I'll hit the 6 key. I'm going to turn off my B shape. Okay, so first of all, this is in the wrong place. So it's in the wrong place, so I'll move it down to about there. And I'm going to scale it up. And I'll move it up a little bit. So there's my cylinder shape. Turn my B back on. So this is where my cylinder needs to be, right? Okay, so no problem. We can do that. And I'm going to need another cylinder down here. So obviously I need to duplicate this guy. So I'll duplicate it and I'll pull it down, and there's my second cylinder. And that's about right. So that's fine. Those two are going to work just fine. So they're in about the right place. So I've got these two cylinders here. So polycylinder 1, polycylinder 2. And I'm going to do a save. I'll say Control S just to save my scene. So why don't we take these two cylinders and throw them on a display layer too? So we'll call these cylinder cutters, disp. Okay, because these are going to be used to cut a hole into our base shape, and it's a display. Okay, so I'll just say blue. Okay, so they're on this layer now. I'm just gonna turn off the viewing on that, and I'll bring back my B shape. So I know I need to make a cut down the center, and I need to cut these guys this way as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go to Edge. I'm just gonna kind of check out what I'm doing here. So I'll split this. I can grab any one of these edges so I can split this ring. Right click, Control, Edge ring and split. Nice. Okay. And now I want to put an X in this guy. So we know we've figured out already, if I bring back my cylinders, we know that if we divide this way and this way, so this way, I'll be able to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've already done the math there. There's a little bit of planning that you got to do. So we figured that out. So I'm going to hide my cylinders again. Let's go ahead and cut these. So I'll bring up my modeling toolkit. So if it says hide modeling toolkit here, it's already up. So look for the little tab on the right hand side. So modeling toolkit, I'll just grab this guy. And here's my multi-cut tool. So I'm going to click this, and let's go in and use the multi-cut tool. So as I already showed you guys in class, you want to go to a point until it goes red, and I'm going to make my first. I'm going to start my first cut by clicking on that point. Okay. So I want to be very careful that that point is right there. Okay. So actually, I think there's a vertex in here somewhere that somehow got missed. So I'm going to blow that away. Okay. So these are little things. See, I just found a little vert. See this guy? I'm not sure how he got in there, but anyway, I'm just going to click that guy and say delete. All right. I'm just going to kind of take a look around to make sure there's no extra points. Okay, so we're good. So multi-cut, let's try this again. And again, when you're making your cuts, zoom in to a point. Okay, so I got this point until it goes red. I click there. I'll zoom out a bit. Come up here. That vertex goes red. So I can click there. Okay, and I know I need to make a cut up here, but I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in, and I'll rotate around a bit until I can see this point. I'll come up, it goes red, beautiful. Okay, so my cut looks good. So to actually make my cut, remember I have to hit enter to make that cut. What it's doing right now, this orange line is indicating what my cut will be once I hit enter. So I still need to hit enter. So I'll go ahead and do that. And there's my cut. All right. So let's just go ahead and repeat the process. Cut looks good. Enter. Okay. So let's do the same for the other side. I'm going to need an X on the other side too. Okay. Perfect. And I'll hit the Q key to exit out of my multi-cut tool. Alright, so let's hit Control A to find our display layers, and we'll bring back these guys. And we're going to go out of this guy, and we're going to start work on these guys, on our cylinders. So let's right click over our B, so we'll go to object mode to get out of this guy's component of the verts, and we're going to click our cylinder, and we're going to start positioning this cylinder in the right place. So actually, I'm going to correct myself there. The cylinder doesn't have to move. We actually do need to keep working with these guys. So let's go ahead and hit the 4 key. Okay, so things are going to get a little bit confusing because, you know, we have some overlapping geometry, and we kind of have to do a little bit of moving around, because really we need things to be centered. We need things to be centered over our cylinder centers. So our cylinder centers are really what we need. If I get rid of those, we need these guys. So I can grab all of these verts here, these two verts here. If I go to the move tool, I don't want to move in the z-axis. Not this way. Okay, do not move in the z-axis. We want these guys to be perfectly flat. Okay, so if you do move it in the z-axis, just hit the Z key to go back. Okay, we want to be moving only in either the red arrow, which is the X, this way, or the Y, which is up and down, the green arrow. And the way we know that we're constrained to that axis, remember, is when the arrow goes yellow. So when it goes yellow, which it has, I'm going to click and drag. Okay, and it goes yellow, click and drag. So we want to only be moving when we're doing this. We want to move in this axis or in this axis. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to snap these points on the Z and the Y axis to the center of the cylinders. So I got those points selected. I'm going to hold the V key, and on the X axis I'm going to drag and click and drag to this center point here. So I know that it just snapped it to the center point on the X. Now I need to make sure it's snapped in the Y. So I'm just going to click and drag until I'm over here, and I think that's about right. So I'll let go, and there we go. We can see it's nicely lined. Okay. So really, because remember, we moved the cylinder into position already according to where these holes are. So the cylinder is now our guide. Okay. Now the same could have been done, like in class, for instance. Okay, in class, what we did was we kind of did it the other way around. We moved these points to the center of the hole in the image, and we had the B, this B guy, this B shape. we had that on another material, and we changed the opacity of the B. So again, there's many different ways to do this, but we're doing this by using the cylinders as our guide at this point. Okay, so there's many different ways that you can do this. So maybe for the video, just use the method that we're using now. So the cylinder was placed accordingly, right? And so we used the cylinder as our guide to reposition these points to its center. Okay, so these points were positioned to the cylinder's center point. Okay, this makes sense? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, now that we have this in place, let's jump back to our cylinders and start making these guys. We'll get the cylinders ready to be integrated into the B shape. Okay, so let's jump back to our cylinders. Let's get out of this guy by going to object mode. Now I'm going to click my cylinders. Okay. And I'll put my base letter, okay, the B, this big red B letter, I'm going to put this on a reference mode, so I can't select it. So now I can only select my cylinders. So let's get our cylinders nicely aligned with the side. This face, this surface needs to be aligned with this surface. So this the cylinder surface, top surface here needs to be aligned with this surface. And by aligned, it needs to be nice and flush. Okay. So let's maybe go into vertex mode. So we'll come to the side. I'm going to grab these verts there. I'll go to move tool. I'll hold the V key, and I'm going to point snap on the Z axis, only on the Z, right to this point here, which will align that perfectly. So I'm gonna zoom in. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in. I'm gonna hold V, and I'm gonna grab this again, and I'm just gonna be awfully certain that it's not snapping it to some other point. It looks like it's grabbing some other point there, but I know that if I come right here and I snap it there, it should be perfect. And the way I can check that is just sort of rotate around, and there it is. Okay. And I'll do the same for this side. So I'll grab all these. I'll hold the V key. I'll grab this axis and snap it to that point. So now I know that my cylinder front faces are nicely flush with my B. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to add an outer rim to this cylinder here, because when I go to connect this up to the B shape, remember, when I smooth out the B shape, I want this to be a nice perfect circular shape. So I want to have an extra edge loop out here to be getting pulled on by these vertices, because again, when smoothing happens, all the vertices look at each other and they calculate the distance. They average out the distance. So this vert is going to be pulling on this vert, and this vert is going to be pulling on this vert. Okay. So now that I know that my cylinder is nicely placed into my B shape, let's hide the B shape altogether, because I know that I don't need the base shape right now, but let's make sure that let's just start working on this guy. We just want to be careful not to move it anywhere. Okay, so we want to keep it in the same place. So first thing I'm going to do is, well, I don't need the inside of this cylinder. So I'm going to go to face mode. I'll turn on the shading. I'll even hide my reference planes. So I don't need these reference planes. Let's just hide them. I'm going to come in. And I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to click and drag in the center here so that I grab the center faces. And then I'll hit the 4 key to just check. So I just come like this. I'm going to click and drag just to grab the centers. And then I'm going to delete those. Okay, so I just have the outer rim of my cylinder. Now I'm going to go to edge mode. Okay, so to go to edge mode, and I'm going to double click my edges here to grab the ring of edges here. I'll hold shift, double click this, hit the 4 key, I'm just going to check. Alright, so I have all of those selected. And now I want to extrude these edges outward. So in my edit mesh, go to edit mesh, under edge, make sure you're under edge, not face, edge. I'm going to come to extrude, and I'm just going to click that guy there. And I'll extrude on the thickness attribute maybe by 0.2. Okay. So I'll hit Q to get out of that. And now I have this nice cylinder. Okay. So I have one cylinder ready to go. Okay. So I'll go to object mode on this guy. One cylinder ready to go. So let's bring back our B shape. And now we need to actually cut a ring into this B shape. Okay, because we need to be able to take this B shape and somehow integrate it into there. So the reason we need to cut a ring is because we need points on these edges to be able to connect. So I need points on all these edges to connect them to these points. So point here, point here, point here. Okay, so we'll just cut a ring into both of these sides. So what I'll do is so I can see my cylinder in there. I'll just come back. I will reference my cylinders and turn off the referencing on my base letter geometry so I can grab this stuff and start working on it. And I'm going to bring up my modeling toolkit, so it's already open. I can just come over here. I'll grab the multi-cut tool, and again I want to come to these edges. I want to click and drag points onto the edges. Okay, so I want to make sure the edge is highlighted, and when the edge is highlighted, I'm going to click and drag anywhere on the edge. Okay, and it'll just go around and drop. Remember, don't put a point on the face, only on the edge. Don't put a point onto a point. You want to cut from the edge. So make sure the edge goes red. Okay, and then when you come up to your last point, it's going to come up, and when it says close, you see how my cursor says close there? See the words right here, it goes close, you just click. So that looks like a good cut. I'll say enter. So now we can take these points and actually weld them to these points in a minute. So let's go to the other side and do that. Other cut. And I'm going to drop this in. Close. Perfect. I'll hit the Q key to get out of that tool. And now I'll go to vertex mode. And in vertex mode, I'll hit the 4 key. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully start snapping all these points to these points, because we know there's a point in here. So I'll hit the V key, the W key. I'm going to hold down the V key. I'm going to click the point here right in the center, and I want to make sure that this yellow box is highlighted. So when the yellow box is highlighted, it means that I can move this point in all axes freely. And once I do that, I can hold the V key and middle mouse drag to any other point. So I know my point's here, so I'm just going to middle mouse drag, and there's that point snapped right there. And I know it's snapped on all axes. And if it's not, I can hit the F key to focus in on the point and rotate around it. And then I'll hit the V key, hold the V key, and make sure it's snapped again by middle mouse dragging. So I know that that's snapped because I'm snapping it to that point. Okay, so I'm going to go around, and I'm just going to snap these points. Just going to snap these points. And if it's a little confusing to you, sometimes things get a little bit confusing. You know, like rotate around so that you're not getting disoriented, and you know, okay, this point's here. It's not some point in the back. Okay. Okay, so it looks like these front ones are done. I'll come to the other side. Okay. I know it's a little bit confusing, but remember, rotate around. Don't work blindly. Okay. So if I now look at this, it looks like all my points are perfectly aligned. Okay. All right. So it looks like I can go to face mode, and now that I have these points perfectly aligned, at some point I'm going to merge my cylinder with the B shape and then weld those verts. But until then, what I'll do is I'll just click and drag to select the interfaces. I'll hit the 4 key to just make sure those interfaces are selected only, and I'll blow those away because I don't need them anymore. Okay. So we'll come back to this and merge these two things together, and then, we'll combine these two meshes together, this guy, and then we'll merge all the verts. But let's do the bottom one now. Okay, so I'll just quickly repeat the process. Okay, so our cylinder has to be realigned. I'm going to turn off the referencing. I'll grab this guy, and I'll just snap this to here, snap this to here. Just going to make really sure that it's nicely snapped. Okay, so that's aligned. My cylinder is nicely aligned. It's nicely placed in. But I know that my cylinder's in the right place, so I need to grab these. I need to grab these verts of my B shape and actually snap them on the X to that point, and on the Y to that center point. Okay. And now I need to cut my X in there. So I'm going to come up here. I'll grab the multi-cut tool, and I'll start making some cuts. Looks good. Okay. And I'll save this file. Save scene as. Okay. And I might have stopped the video, but I mean we're a bit far along. Actually, I'll stop the video for a second and I'll finish this up because you don't need to learn this again. Okay, so I'll be back in a second.